Sahel, we will not discuss about the importance of security in the development of our country, and we are all witness of what is happening in the Sahel space. So now we listen to Mr. Ibro Abdou to talk about the fragile nature of the Sahelian space. Mr. Ibro, the floor is yours.
You have 15 minutes. Or let's say 17 minutes. Huh? Will that be okay for you? So, you have the floor, please. Good morning. My name is Ibro Abdou. I'm at the head of a training institute in the master's area regarding the prospects of evaluation and strategies. Evaluation, prospective work, and evaluation. Today we are going to look at something which is totally disconnected. It's something that seems to be totally disconnected with regard to our agenda, but that is not the case. For me, it's a great honor to participate in this symposium in honor of Professor Samin. It's a tribute to him, Samin the professor, and Samin the researcher, and also Samin the militant, and Samir, a humanistic person. It is important to recall here all these qualities of this man. Samir was able to harness all this. He taught what he wanted to share as a message. He deepened the reflection in relation to his militant project, and he set up and worked with people in order to have his project succeed. Now, what we are going to talk about this morning is that we should know that the issue of disconnection or deconnection is very, very important in our security theme, simply because we have to do some sort of historical return. You know, the fall of the Soviet Union has had some consequences whose results are simply a global decomposition where people now have the world has been a world of conflict, a planet which has become almost a proliferation planet, and we also know that in relation to the fall of the Soviet Union, we have a world that is a paradoxical world. It is also the result of the globalization in which a system, a new system has seen the light of day. And starting from there, the question is, what do we have to do in order to correct all these anomalies? And so, from whatever we have evoked, we are in a situation, a breaking system of accumulation model in which at the time there was a coincidence between the accumulation space and that of the political management of conflicts. So the world today is characterized by globalization of accumulation, and the difficulty is that we don't have a state to manage it due to the inexistence of a state to, of course, manage this state. And this has led to a certain number of elements which are as follows. from this new configuration, we have, well, accumulation which has become global, and Africa it becomes increasingly marginal and finding it difficulty to follow the new pace because there is low productivity in Africa and specializations which are also primary because it remains outside the demand of competitiveness on the world market, and this puts Africa is in a world which is becoming increasingly rich, while its population, that is the African population, is becoming increasingly poor. So in relation to this image of Africa in this globalizing world, we realize that there is also the fact that Africa was crossed by a political acceleration. Now this political acceleration, where does it come from? You see, globalization has simply gotten crystallized around the preoccupations of a certain number of nations which are the control over a certain number of elements that Amin called the control of communication, the control of technology, and so on. And as a result, globalization has left the rest of the world in a weak condition. And so this fact that Africa was crossed by a certain number of elements which are democracy, multipartism, and has, of course, brought about fundamentalism, communitarism, and this has led to wars and a certain number of wars. Globalization on the whole has weakened Africa. Globalization has created conditions in Africa which makes it sad that Africa has no capacity to respond to external shocks. Now, these are the factors, internal factors, that have actually weakened Africa. Globalization. There is also factors which are internal to Africa. And in an approach that we are going to look at in our institute, we have tried to identify from the internal standpoint whether there have been factors or whether there are factors which have contributed to increasingly weaken Africa. Well, we have our institute doing the identification of these factors by using instruments and approaches which are prospective oriented, and this has made it possible for us to have the identification of these factors that we considered as factors that have weakened Africa. They are 13 in number. These factors start from overpopulation of Africa, and of course the destruction of financial sources, the deterioration of our environment, up to prospective studies, and least power to be able to defend our environment. And then we also have the international power structures. So we treated and analyzed through a structural analysis standpoint, which makes it possible for us to order them, but also to be able to pinpoint those factors which are in fact the vehicles of Africa's weakness. Now, looking at the structural analysis of the factors that we identified, the result that we saw is that the most influential factors for Africa's weakness are the international power relations, religious divisions, absence of prospective studies, the weakness of our resources, or in fact the lack of our resources. These are the most influential factors. There is also the fact that we have factors that we can identify as dependent factors, and this comes from the structural analysis that we undertook in the light of the factors that we identified. So from this first exercise, where we were able to pinpoint the most important factors of weakening and the factors which are dependent on this weakening aspect, we also undertook another exercise. This was to treat these factors in the light of an application that was developed by a French writer, Goudet, and this application is a cross matrix and makes it possible simply to grasp among the factors that we have determined, those which are the major factors of our weakness, and those which were identified as relay factors, and the factors which are result-oriented factors, and of course factors over which we have no influence. So from this exercise, with regard to the application of cross-impact matrix, we of course we came up with this table that you have on the screen, and where we see the application and indicates in this this screen on your right, they are the so-called most important factors, that pooling factors which participate in the weakening and the breakup of Africa. Now, we also have relay factors which could become very important factors related to results in relation to the factors that pilot these different factors. They can also be identified, but we need to realize that we have essential factors that play a role in Africa's weakness, especially international power relations, and this has made it possible for us to, of course, accept a certain number of elements coming to us from the outside world. All these are part of power relations on which we have no control whatsoever. And the identification of these factors, from these factors we said the following, because the factors that weakened Africa is the international power relations, the scope of territories, religious visions, the lack of resources, poverty, lack of strategies, of course the scope of our borders, and here we have the variables which are vehicles of this weakness. They are as follows. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them: power relations, scope of territories, religious visions, the weakness of means of defense, and of course proselytism from the religious standpoint. What we did was to consider that these factors in truth were identified as factors that have led led Africa, that is the lack of capacity to meet external shocks, and it is these factors that should also be looked at. The identification of these factors of weakness we identified, and we said that they called in other factors which we called factors of security factors, and this is why international power relations identified as major factors of weakness brings in other factors which are risk factors, which are relationships of domination, because we are talking about power relations, and so colonization, wars, various tensions, hegemony, sanctions and so on and so forth. And we think that these factors, which can be classified as risk factors, and any of the other factors brought into existence other factors also in their train. So using another element which consists in pinpointing risks, because up to now we have been looking at perspectives of identification of risk factors. So we try to see these risk factors, I examine them. Do they really become risks? Because for us the exercise is to be able to pinpoint those so-called major factors of risks, and in the light of this identification we set up strategies to be able to correct them. We therefore identified a set of risks which are here according to factors. We classify them, and the method of calculation of risk, where we considered that risks in the Transparency International approach, well, you may say they are subjective, but it gives us the aptitude to implement these risks or achieve them and multiply them to be able to see how we can overcome them. For example, proselytism from the the standpoint of religion. There are 5 scales upon which we can study it, but the impact that will produce are 5. But that is not what is most important, because this exercise that we developed are exercises of serializing with people of the youth who are specialized in the various areas. We have identified a certain number of risks, and from these risks, the most we see that all the factors that we identified, sorry for my voice, have become risk factors. All the risks that we identified have become risks indeed, because they become risks if the product is not 0 or nil. So they are all risks, and what we have to do is to evaluate these risks, because the exercise of the approach that we have adopted is how to order them, because you have a whole multitude of factors of risk which have also generated another set of risks, and which helps us to pinpoint in the ordering of these risks. And this is done through this table that you have on the screen, in which we consider here in the abscissa or in the ordinates the probable conditions. Is the risk impossible or improbable, or is it certain, and so on and so forth. So that's how we classify them, and we consider whether these risks are significant, are they minor, are they moderate, are they major, or catastrophic. So in the light of what we have, it is the basis of our convention. We're able to identify a set of risks which are, we see it clearly, that the Sahelian area have become major risk areas, and the catastrophic or major risk is everywhere. You see, once we see that a risk is major or catastrophic, what is the probability of their action or effect? So on the basis of these pieces of information, we're able to capture the risks and act on them. And therefore we identified a set of risks which have been, of course, registered here, which are serious risks that will be seen in the document. I just want to go very, very fast to respect the time given to me. And so, from all the risks that have been identified, most of these risks come from external factors of weakness, namely international power relations, imposed policies of development, and security facts created by external factors are also factors that lead to the loss of sovereignty. And this is where we want to get to. You see, in West Africa in particular, and the Saharan region particularly, literature, empirical literature relating to issues of international power relations make this part of Africa has lost its capacity of having a program of development that is sovereign programs, and colonization created an exogenous dislocation through a certain number of factors. Because when you take Niger, for example, a book that was written by Maurice Sabadi, he says explicitly that the school is the warhorse from which we'll be able to, in the current discourse, be able to format the mentalities of people. And this is why the question of sovereignty, intellectual sovereignty, comes in. Because unfortunately, we all have this framework that has brought us where we are. We, for example, the Washington Consensus also plunged us in a system of accumulation that will, of course, lead us to what we are seeing today. And development factors have made it possible to meet external shocks. Pedro, please conclude. Your time is up. Now, the conclusion is this. In contrast to Europe of the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, where transformation comes from an internal dynamic that we call dislocation or endogenous transformation, which made it stronger, Africa, for her part, followed, of course, the process of exogenous transformation, whose results have led to our inability to meet external shocks and a submission. In the face of this situation, I'm talking about Africa, the same remedies were applied, and the performance of our societies in which transformation, because of their internal dynamics, and that is what is complicated. So the the internal dynamic from the Western world has denatured the instrument of its transformation. Now, can this process be duplicated by the transformation of a social formation? This transformation, can it give similar products and, of course, produce exogenous dislocation? The actors of this acts continue to be analyzed, and this is what the, of course, experts say. Africa continues to be fed with instruments that are relative. The result of all these exercises is a weaker Africa, fragilized through the globalization, which is creating new shocks and which are generators of factors of security risks. So, of course, IDEP has looked at these factors, treated them, and what we have to say today is that the manifestation of these risks are terrorism, banditism, arms trafficking, and wars which are imposed on Africa. The solution of this manifestation is to attack the factors which brought them to the fore. So today, more than yesterday, the theory of deconnection has to be at the very heart of the search for solutions for countries that have undergone the dislocation and exogenous transformation. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ibru, who has just concluded on the theory of deconnection. I will talk about positive disconnection. Perhaps Guida, we will request authorization from Trevor. Trevor, if you don't mind. On a voulu que Guetta continue de là où Ibru a terminé pour parler de la région sahélienne, spécifiquement le cas du Mali, et on viendra à l'expérience sud-africaine. Ça c'est acceptable. Thank you so much. I'm going to be very fast to ensure that we can have more time for interaction. So I'm going to talk about the situation of conflicts in the Sahel, focusing on the case of Mali. I think Ibru has given us in a global manner the appreciation in relation to some categories of factors which contributed to this change, radical changes of the situation in countries of the Sahel, and which extended to coastal countries. But I just want to share a certain number of important points because for those who read the press, there's so much erroneous information to the extent that we don't know where to go, because most of the people we meet, especially when we go to Mali, that this country is in a very difficult situation and there are no prospects at all to come out of the crisis. I just want to insist on two essential points mainly. We forget that historically Mali had conflicting situations in this part of our country, especially in the north and the east, because Kidal is in the eastern part of Mali with repeated rebellions, but that was a colonial project. It started right from President de Gaulle of France, that the prospect of creation of the Azawad was there. I want to just recall it. It's something that we can never forget. It's something that has come from very far as the colonial period. So the question of the Azawad is in the heads of a lot of communities, bearing in mind that the Tuareg community has about 37 clans in Mali. And out of these 37 clans, you see in the rebellion 2 of them, which are the Jomanas, which are more in the leadership role than the others. And due to this historical approach, which is also important to mention, we also forget that right from 2001, that there exists in Mali a joint operation that was set up by the Americans called the Flint Flock, and which can be seen in the film that Aziz proposed, and which had training between Burkina, Mali, and Niger on the operations of anti-terrorist operations. So it started way back in 2001, and the year following, 2002, France had the Glimata operations. Each year, Gilimagar brings joint operations, Mali, Burkina, Niger, at the area called the three-border zone, or three-frontier zone, which is different from the Ouagadougou forest, which is between Mali and Mauritania. So there have been various operations, joint operations, to prepare the troops, the armies, for an anti-terrorist struggle. But it has several meanings. I don't have time to talk to you about the tool. What is the oil map of Mali? Because Mali has this map prepared during the Amadi Toumani Touré regime and negotiated several enterprises to secure its exploration. There was about 30 basins, and none of the French enterprises had the exploration license, because the major enterprises that have started the exploration were CITEX, CITEX, which is of Algerian origin or regime. This was a major starting point, and this is what started in Mali. We forget it, but it's extremely important to recall it. And if you look at the basins, I should have shown you the map earlier, but you'll see it later. You see the basins which are of green color has other resources, uranium and so on. And this was left as a reserve product because of the sensitivity and the diversity of resources in this area. And what we call the three frontier zone is at the mouth of this area. This is something that has created a lot of friction between the Malian state and France in relation to the exploration of these resources. There are articles at the time that we drafted to show the link between the situation that has deteriorated increasingly in this zone much earlier than the intervention in Libya that caused the other aspect, that is the rearmament part of the rebellions in Kidal, but the starting point of the, of course, rebellion, which was rearmed, but it came before this period because there were arms that were circulating. I had the privilege of the National Committee for Action to Combat Rebellions in Mali, and which had collected arms with populations whose source are known. So these arms that constitute the flame of peace were just trafficking persons. And this is a problem which is sufficiently clear. And since the first flame of peace, where this flame came without the identification of the traceability of arms, had to change. And so there were several sources outside from other elements coming from Chad, which are doubly etiqueted from between Chad and Uzbekistan. All these arms were identified before being set on fire. So there's a part of the stock belonged to the French stock. This was before we of course we sent arms to Libya, and of course the nucleus of the MNL was there, which is part of the Libyan army, and which was transported through the agreement of the Malian authority that met in Kidal, about 50 million that gave to these troops by telling them welcome, but they had the deal to save the 6 French hostages. Let me drop it because this story is well known. There are 2 elements that I want to insist on so that we can have a debate. Now, the violent fundamentalism has actually seeped into our society, and this is a part that has been disseminated at international levels. The youth that we ask put questions: why do you enter the armed groups? They will tell you nobody can attest that they are linked to Ayat or another, because the groups are so diverse that today there's no pole of convergence between these different groups. That complicates the situation, but that's the case. So when we take most of these youths, the first fundamental reason is the search for means because of extreme unemployment that is caused by phenomena that Ebro talked about, structural adjustment and many other things that created the mass unemployment. Most of them who go take up arms say, look, we have nothing to lose, because they are paid to undertake these operations. $300 every day. When there's more money, some have 50. They prefer to have that. The second reason is the security of their families, because most of the young boys that come in, of course, also have arms to, of course, shoot and protect their family. So these are the 2 principal reasons. Now, some of these groups, which from these enrollment operations create the conditions of entry. So to join these groups, there are other reasons. But there are groups, when the groups enter, are indoctrinated and become radicals in the religious sense. I want to insist on this. There's a second element which is also important, because there have been inter-community conflicts. People give the impression that these inter-community conflicts are recent. Oh no, it started long ago in 1996 with a team, with a research team on border questions. We were able to identify 860 inter-community or extra-community conflicts due to the management of land resources in this region of Mopti. And why? Because the justice was not good. There was corruption in the public administration with regard to these conflicts. And this is why they have moved on to have what we call violent nature of these conflicts. There's no mechanism, and there have been external interferences with regard to this phenomenon of the settlement of conflicts. And because of this, these conflicts have degenerated to where we see today. And this actually is known at the international media. So when we take today the trajectory, because that is what to do, Mali is, of course, negotiating with Iyad Agali and Amadou Kufa that were called jihadists, and so on and so forth. Now we forget the term, and then we are looking at the terrorists, because everybody knows the situation that is prevailing. When we talk about the situation of MLA, we come to Ansardin, then we go to Mujao. Mujao is Acme that intervenes, which has despite of course disappeared. Mujao Arab and Tuareg, and then Mujao Pearl, or the Fulani Mujao, which are all part of it, and which came to claim the sheep and cattle that were stolen from them, and came to occupy the pastoral lands that were existing at the time. So when you take on both sides, we see that there is the macroeconomic aspect with the external interference, or the rush for resources in this area, and which also created a conflict between different corporations in the northern part of Mali. And when we see the manner in which we have actually increased these conflicts, we see the problem that Mali is facing. So at the border of Senegal, there were movements. These are not persons come from Yagali or Amadou Kufa. It's not their land of predilection. They are not also well dispersed to go to this area. But there are other groups who decided to go and attack military camps and so on. And there, when you are able to, of course, enter in, you have about 99,000 CFA francs. So it is accompanied by a proliferation of arms to go and attack people who are doing works on the fair, and when there are resistances, they kill. Or if they look at the IDs to see who is, a Christian or a Muslim, it all came in. If you are a non-Muslim, you may be gunned down, and so on and so forth. So Christianity came back, entered Mali through Kita. So there is a macroeconomic link to this issue of resources, and then there is a certain number of internal factors that contributed both. And then there's a problem of governance negligence of the state with regard to the youth, and which has created another inter-community conflict. I'll stop here. I think we'll have time to talk about it more in depth. Thank you, Mamadou, to have respected the time frame that was given to you. And Mamadou went over an aspect which is a very important aspect, that is security risks, talking about the case of Mali. And I think we realized that he introduced the stakes of natural resources in the land area and mining resources also. But he also raised, from my standpoint, the question of factors which are not risk factors or risk sectors which are not only external but also internal to our economies. And now I invite Trevor to talk to us about South Africa in his paper entitled South Africa's Shrinking Sovereignty, Economic Crisis, Ecological Damage, Sub-Imperialism and Structural Social Struggle. Thank you, Trevor. You are invited to present your paper. Thank you.
This very important occasion.
Donc, merci beaucoup de cette occasion pour rendre hommage à Samin Amin, un grand scientifique, un visionnaire. Et je vais parler de ce qui ne va pas en Afrique du Sud et ce qui n'a pas marché. Donc, malgré le titre, je vais parler d'un autre thème, la primauté de la politique et l'échec de la route capitaliste. L'Afrique du Sud est un pays en crise et personne ne croit au rôle joué par nos dirigeants. Pas une seule personne vivant en Afrique du Sud. Oui, nous sommes d'accord, la défaite de l'apartheid a été une grande victoire, mais comparé aux attentes et ce qui a été possible, le résultat a été donc un échec. L'Afrique du Sud aujourd'hui est donc un pays où il y a le plus d'inégalités, un grand taux de chômage, la terre n'a pas été retournée, rendue aux personnes. L'insécurité alimentaire et une faible éducation, un taux de violence sur le genre et donc les flux des capitaux, les fuites des capitaux également. Le problème fondamental aujourd'hui est la corruption, l'enrichissement illicite et donc au plus haut niveau du gouvernement. Par exemple, l'ancien président Zuma, Jacob, devrait donc démissionner à cause de cela. En Afrique du Sud, il y a toujours des coupures de courant et donc ce qui est dommageable à l'économie. L'État, les compagnies étatiques en charge de l'électricité, ESCOM, et donc connaît un échec parce que justement à cause d'une mauvaise gestion. Également, l'Afrique du Sud contribue à la destruction écologique de son monde. L'Afrique du Sud est donc le plus grand émetteur d'émissions de carbone parce que cela génère l'électricité utilisant le charbon. L'Afrique du Sud est en train de payer tout cela. Et donc, l'année dernière, il y a eu des cyclones au Malawi, au Zimbabwe. Et donc, qu'est-ce qui s'est passé? Il y a donc une réhabilitation en cours, et donc sans réalisme. Alors, M. Desmond Tutu, l'archevêque, a donc lancé un appel et son mouvement est donc continue. Et donc, quelles que soient les transitions au niveau de la démocratie, cela a été l'objet d'un deal avec le capital. En fait, le résultat a favorisé le capital, le monopole du capital. De telle sorte que le nouveau gouvernement, la nouvelle élite gouvernementale n'a pas beaucoup de pouvoir. Par exemple, dans la sphère de l'éducation et de la culture, il existe toujours le néocolonialisme. Les étudiants de l'université se sont soulevés en 2015 en se plaignant et en disant pourquoi on ne nous a pas appris les idées de Frantz Fanon, les idées de Julius Nyerere, de Cheikh Anta Diop, pourquoi est-ce qu'on nous apprend justement les idées égocentriques. Et ils ont même osé dire que Nelson Mandela a été un vendu. Et donc l'exploitation des capitalistes, des capitalistes continue. Durant les booms des produits de base de 2000 par exemple, le platine, par exemple, on a vu des profits incalculables. Et donc, en 2013, lorsque la crise économique a frappé de plein fouet et que les travailleurs se sont soulevés, ils ont demandé à ce que le salaire soit augmenté. On a donc envoyé la police sur eux, et donc c'est le massacre de Marikana. Et beaucoup de gens sont morts par balle. Et donc, ils ont demandé des changements de système. Alors maintenant, nous devons retourner et regarder un peu ce qui n'a pas marché. Évidemment, il est vrai que l'Afrique du Sud, en 1994, lorsqu'on a eu l'indépendance, ça a été un moment extrêmement difficile dans l'histoire du monde, une conjoncture extrêmement difficile. Et vous savez, c'était l'ère du soulèvement du néolibéralisme et la chute du communisme. Mais nous savons également que nous avons fait l'histoire dans des conditions que l'on n'a pas choisies. C'est comment donc on a répondu aux certains défis. Et c'est comment les groupes sociaux différents ont répondu aux différents défis. Et donc, Karl Marx avait raison. Donc, les forces de l'histoire, et donc, ceux qui en souffrent le plus, ce sont les masses. Et donc, on a lutté contre l'apartheid. Et donc, partout on avait les ouvriers, partout on avait la classe ouvrière et les pauvres, et donc au devant de la scène. C'est vrai parce qu'on a reçu beaucoup d'appui dans les mouvements de l'apartheid, et beaucoup d'entre vous ont même lutté contre l'apartheid. Mais l'ANC s'était toujours placé au centre de l'histoire, élevant le rôle des leaders individuels, et donc mettant de côté le rôle de ceux qui ont souffert des travailleurs. Mais si vous regardez très bien notre histoire, par exemple ce qu'on appelle l'ANC, quand il a tourné le dos aux masses, tout cela a été précipité par la grève en 1996 des mineurs. Également, dans les années 70, nous avions eu des rébellions menées par les paysans. Également, cela également a précipité la lutte armée de l'ANC. Et en fait, la lutte armée était une étape nécessaire dans notre lutte, mais la façon dont l'ANC l'a menée, la façon dont ils ont pris les décisions n'a pas été démocratique, et ils ne l'ont pas exécuté entièrement et totalement. Et beaucoup sont morts à partir de cela. Et donc, pour lutter contre le régime d'apartheid. Et une chose a été la lutte armée menée par l'ANC, et cela n'a pas impliqué toutes les masses. Et donc, ça a été une insuffisance stratégique. Le résultat, après Sharpeville en 1960, il y a eu beaucoup de problèmes. Et donc, avec l'arrivée des travailleurs et de leur guerre en 1963, on a eu l'une des plus grandes grèves. Et cela a été la naissance, justement, de l'Afrique du Sud, de puissante, et des mouvements de syndicats forts de l'Afrique du Sud. Et donc, la COSATU, donc ce mouvement très connu, ce syndicat, a été mené par la gauche et non pas par l'ANC. Et après les années 60, lorsque les étudiants se sont soulevés, c'était pas l'ANC, c'était Steve Biko, et c'était la conscience noire, le mouvement de la conscience noire. Et en fait, et même dans les années 80, avec le soulèvement au niveau des townships, au niveau des villages, nous avons vu l'apartheid qui a été poussé contre le mur et a demandé donc des négociations. Cela a été le résultat de soulèvement des townships et des ouvriers, et donc qui ont appelé à l'union avec les comités des rues et des villages pour faire face à l'apartheid. Ce mouvement, dans les années 80, qui a poussé justement l'apartheid, qui a combattu l'apartheid, a été mené par des slogans de la classe ouvrière. Tout le monde savait que la lutte contre l'apartheid devait être menée par les travailleurs, par le leadership de la classe ouvrière. Et en fait, à chaque fois, on voulait faire quelque chose, il fallait aller rejoindre le COSATU, c'est-à-dire ce syndicat puissant, et mener le travail de l'opposition, parce qu'on ne pouvait pas y aller sans la participation des travailleurs. Et donc il y a eu une vision d'une alternative, la vision du socialisme. Alors, donc c'était donc les slogans étaient la démocratie des travailleurs, l'avenir des travailleurs et le pouvoir des travailleurs. Et donc cela a amené à une préoccupation. Qu'est-ce qu'ils ont fait? Ils ont fui. La première réunion s'est tenue ici à Dakar. Ils ont fui et ils sont allés rencontrer l'ANC et donc avec certains patrons anglo-américains. Ils voulaient donc mettre en place une organisation qui allait condamner les masses et qui était prêt justement à signer un deal. Et en fait, lorsque l'ANC a repris le pouvoir en 1994, lorsque Mandela est sorti de la prison de Robben Island à cause de ces mouvements des travailleurs et des jeunesses détenus, la première chose qu'il a faite, c'est de fermer nos organisations populaires. Il a donc mis un terme à ce front démocratique et donc le congrès de la jeunesse de l'Afrique du Sud et a mis un terme justement à l'organisation des femmes à cause de ce qui s'est passé. La COSATU donc était sous contrôle maintenant et on l'a ramené au niveau de parti de l'Afrique du Sud, du Parti communiste de l'Afrique du Sud, et donc qui a formé le bloc qui dirige le pays. L'ANC a mis l'accent sur les négociations qui nous ont mené à un deal qui devait mettre de côté qui rendait confortable le capital, et avec la venue de tous les patrons et à tous ces gens-là qui ont exploité les travailleurs, et donc on les a appelés maintenant les partenaires sociaux avec la révolution. Le rôle du socialisme a été abandonné par Mandela et l'ANC a été tenu par le Parti communiste. Maintenant, ce que nous voyons ici, un camarade hier avait dit, je pense que c'était le camarade Aziz, qui avait dit qu'en Égypte, il y avait un témoignage des forces internes, un affaiblissement des forces internes. Et donc c'est la raison pour laquelle on a eu à mener ce combat-là. Et donc par exemple le leadership de la COSATU, ce syndicat-là, et donc n'avait pas de réponse à savoir comment prendre le pouvoir. Ça a été caractérisé par des perspectives syndicalistes et cet économisme syndicaliste. Et le Parti communiste également est venu avec cette idée de socialisme en disant que c'est une théorie à deux étages, évidemment avec un capitalisme libéré et plus tard seulement qu'on pourrait avoir le socialisme. Et cela également arrangeait les patrons. Et donc la puissance des travailleurs donc a été mise de côté et le leadership a été donné à ces cadres moyens de l'ANC. Ils s'en sont venus avec cette idée de bourgeoisie patriotique, alors avec l'habilitation. Et donc notre président Ramaphosa est un milliardaire qui a bénéficié justement de cela à partir des mines et des exploitants. Et donc pour conclure, cette partie du socialisme, et même le premier programme qui a été social-démocratique, qui a permis à l'ANC de gagner la première élection avec la possibilité d'une reconstruction, a été abandonnée après 2 ans. Et donc en ce moment-ci, ils sont en train de lutter parce que chacun s'est rendu compte maintenant que les choses ne vont pas comme ils devraient aller. Il y a beaucoup de protestations, il y a beaucoup de grèves et malheureusement, il n'y a pas eu une cohérence pour se rassembler pour former un mouvement uni. Par exemple, si vous allez avec les syndicats, nous avons beaucoup d'automatisation, ce qu'on appelle la 4e révolution industrielle, où il y a beaucoup de gens qui perdent de leur emploi. Et vous voyez que les syndicats continuent à lutter et cela forme un cap. Et on ne peut pas répondre justement par rapport à ces défis. Mais l'unité représente la clé. Nous devons nous rassembler et rassembler les forces populaires. Il y a de nouveaux partis, comme par exemple les Freedom Fighters, et donc les combattants de la liberté, c'est pas le temps de développer. Et donc, pour en revenir à ce que je disais, il faut lutter contre cette maladie de la politique capitaliste. Nous avons le NUNSA, qui est le syndicat des métallurgistes, et donc qui a rejoint le parti révolutionnaire, mais ils sont toujours en train de lutter pour justement apprendre des enseignements des partis communistes pour pouvoir mener à bien leur politique. Aujourd'hui, l'Afrique du Sud, Madame la Présidente, c'est justement une cocotte minute où chacun essaie de travailler, de se frayer un chemin. Les gens souffrent dans les townships. La jeunesse, le chômage est à 70%. Et donc chacun est en train de crier, excepté la bourgeoisie qui se fait de l'argent sur le dos des travailleurs. Et aujourd'hui, l'ANC aujourd'hui a perdu son orientation développementiste. Et maintenant, il embrasse le capitalisme, par exemple. Le problème d'électricité, par exemple, et des coupures d'électricité. Récemment, on a nommé un Africané, un directeur exécutif pour mener cela et pour pousser l'agenda néolibéral, je dois dire. Ce dont on a besoin comme idée de Samin, par exemple, les idées de Samin, les relations entre l'Afrique du Sud et les autres pays africains sont des relations médiocres. Beaucoup de bourgeois reprennent le leadership, mais l'Afrique du Sud ne va pas justement mener la totalité de l'Afrique pour sortir de l'impérialisme. Nous avons besoin d'un autre mouvement anti-apartheid pour aider nos dirigeants et pour nous aider à aller vers la deuxième décolonisation pour qu'on puisse nous libérer de l'étreinte de l'impérialisme. Camarade Shérif a eu raison. Nous n'avons plus besoin de développement, on a besoin d'une émancipation. Professeur Bernard Fono a raison. Nous avons besoin de l'unité des travailleurs et des paysans. Nous avons besoin de la jeunesse pour apprendre notre histoire. Les idées, pour apprendre les idées de Samir Amin et pour apprendre à restaurer le rôle de la classe ouvrière et des paysans qui se mettront à la tête de notre révolution. L'avenir appartient à la jeunesse, mais le futur appartient également aux travailleurs. Je vous remercie.
Shérif,
merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Shérif. Trevor will tell you everything I did so that he will abandon everything to come. He said that no, I don't abandon anything, I will come and continue to Dakar. Trevor is that rebellious Africa that have been fighting for decades. Trevor is like Kase, Amada Soko, Landing Savane, Shatijan Gajo, all those people that at that time were resistance. We organized at the image of our brothers. When we were persecuted by the police and the colonial administration, we happened to come in a cinema room and we constituted a square in the middle together because we had to do that or to go to the cemetery to have meeting. We need this youth. Development is economic growth, to create research, to create wealth, to live. But the development also is thinking about the others that are coming up, the youth that are coming. We need to protect the environment to come up to what Nyerere was saying, in Africa where we can live with dignity and blossoming. Thank you very much, Trevor, my brother. Now, Trevor was the road cutter, those people who cut the electricity and they fed the zones that was not fed with electricity. Thank you very much, my brother Trevor, once again.
Merci beaucoup, Shérif.
Thank you very much, Shérif. It's true that Trevor, in his intervention, had given us, had reminded us this leadership, South African leadership, trade unionist fighting against what has constituted his presentation, which pop up again since the beginning of the symposium, the relationship, the power relationship, and how to fight against those power relationships on which Professor Amin that we celebrate today, to whom we pay tribute, has always pondered. He came back on social struggle, the persistent preoccupation in South Africa, and the perspective that might pop up or that might be put to the forefront. We pay tribute to Madame Aminata Traoré, who is here, our leader, our dean.
Maintenant, on passe.
Is the former Minister of Culture of Mali. Now we are going now to the discussion. We'll go to discussion.
Une liste déjà d'interventions. Je vois M. Gadio, Firoz, M. Gadio.
Mr. Gadio, Gadio là. M. Ba.
On nous dit qu'on passe à...
Now we were told that we go for the break now, and then the discussions will start after the break. Coffee break, 15 minutes.
We're going to move on to the next session, which talks about the migratory crisis. And Aisha and Alawi were to handle that. Marie Ange Gay, Shamai Elsi, and Asidin Balis. So if these persons are in the room, please get onto the podium. Marie Ange, is she here? Mariange, please. Aisha Alawi. Aisha El Alawi. And then Aisha Maedzi. There are two Aishas. And then Bernard Funu is in this room, who has to chair the session. Salif. Otherwise, you can start. Because time is not on our side. So Aisha El Alawi and then Aisha Maezi, if they are here, please mount the stage. Thank you, Demba. We have time constraint. In fact, we will try to listen to the presentations, the discussions. We'll handle them maybe on the lobbies when we prepare the documents for everything that we've done here. So we don't need to wait for the others. They'll join us, Aisha, Bernard, before they join us. So let me give the floor to Marie Angelique for her presentation. Thank you. Well, let's respect the time, 15 minutes. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sharif. Permit me to salute or greet Thank you, Sharif, for the beautiful initiative that you took for the organization of this symposium, which has come in the nick of time to honor Professor Samin Amin. I bring greetings to the entire assembly, the men, or let's say the women, men present in this room. Permit me first of all to pay tribute to Samin Amin, one of the last pharaohs of contemporary Egypt, who left us in 2008, leaving before him a community of scientists, and shocked by this disappearance or his death. In paying tribute to Samin Amin, for the past 2 or 3 days, I think we forgot to pay tribute to his wife, Isabel Amin, who was the faithful partner of Samin Amin. She had shouldered him throughout his life and all times through his works. As you may know, for his story, when I wrote my book, Isabel was the first person who read the book, and when she read, she said, "Marie-Ange, your book is good, but we are going to submit it to Samir. Let me advise you, if Samir says the book is good, there's nothing to say, because Samir is very severe with regard to writings." And this was done. And so Samir was given the book, and he came up with the answer that it was good, and he prefaced the book himself. So behind every great man, there is a great woman, and this great woman is Isabel Amin. My intervention revolves around the modern time traffic which was developed in connection with the great scourge that is made up of migration, whether clandestine or legal migration. When we look at the very painful element of migration, accompanied by deports, deaths, exclusions from the welcoming country, the deterioration of candidates for migration who are not yet adapted or even viable. There is even a more sharpened aspect of this migration, whether it is illegal or legal. It is the new trade, that is the new type of slavery which came into existence in connection with this migration. The major aspects or lines of this phenomenon is when there are candidates for immigration who are looking for well-paid jobs. There is mafia networks that capture them, take them and direct them through convoys into countries where they are sold out as slaves. This is what I call the mafia slavery groups, and these networks possess a whole address list very well prepared, because having lived in Arab countries or having their authorization to enter and exit from certain areas, and even look for young women for this slavery practice. And this situation affects the women of several women in this Saharian area, whether it's Mali, Burkina, and so on, and even beyond, because we realize or we remember the situation of Malagasy women who went through a very disastrous experiences when they were, of course, candidates for the United Arab Emirates. The motivations that push most of these women to go and look for the El Dorado is, first, there is the condition of abject poverty and the precarious living conditions in their communities or their villages, and they think that they'll be able to improve their lot when they get to immigration points and carried away by the so-called conveyors. There is also the aspect of their social, that is the insufficiency of the policies of integration of women that doesn't make it possible for them to have access to the economic resources and also production apparatuses. The phenomenon of illiteracy, the absence of training adapted to a mode of life, these are all factors that exist and push them to immigrate. If we take migratory phenomena, it will be observed that since 2005, migratory flows have been feminized on the African continent. You only need to look at the film that is presented to us on the boats that cross the Atlantic. We see masses of women, children, and even pregnant women who enter this boat to go elsewhere, that is to Europe mainly. As regards legal migration, it is often organized by experienced traffickers, wicked, of course, persons who have a very long experience in this area, and they proceed with the recruitment of young women to whom they of course, promise very wonderful things in the Arab countries by offering them jobs with high salary levels. In reality, the travel offered to the candidates is just a vast traffic that consists of course, selling them to rich Saudi families, and they undergo a lot. They are, of course, beaten, deprived of food very badly, of course, taken care of, and work as far as belated hours in the night without any rests. And they are confronted with one major obstacle, the problem of language, because most of them do not speak Arabic. They neither talk nor write Arabic. So we see increasingly on the continent what is called sexual slavery in countries like Saudi Arabia, where women trafficking gives with impunity the sale of these women with impunity to the Arabs. Now, this has been, of course, denounced by the human rights commissions. Such women, some of them are sold as sex slaves in Saudi Arabia. And investigation took place in Senegal and got involved and arrested the principal brains behind this. But after a short, a relatively short spell, the traffic has continued even up to now. These girls are sent to a sexual traffic situation in these countries over the last few years. Under the pressure, there has been pressure from the international level. ECOWAS played its role, African countries protested, and so on. Human rights associations also protested, and this led the governments of the United Arab Emirates, which undertook some reform of its laws to meet the concerns of those whip up the Khalifa system to propose, of course, migratory work with very abusive conditions. Particularly, there were measures to prevent the confiscation of the passports of workers, because this is what will enable their employers to transfer some sort of a sponsorship for the protection of their salaries. Now, but it must be underscored that in spite of all these efforts, human rights organizations know that the poor practices of abusive work continues to persist and have reached a very alarming proportion. One of the saddest cases that we experienced directly here in Senegal was the case of Bayan Group, who was accused of killing her boss, who wanted to, of course, rape her. This case has remained very complex for Senegalese, but our authorities succeeded to prevent the execution of this woman, which had been planned for 2009. But up to now, the Saudian authorities also do not want to accept the extradition of this woman. Now, as regards Senegalese women, even some neighbors like Mauritania give very bad conditions in Mauritania, putting, of course, Senegalese women, and some of them are thrown into prison for being accused of elements or situations that they hadn't even done. But it is all a form of segregation. But the situation of slavery is known through the, of course, human rights organizations, especially under the Sahel band, up to Lebanon and Saudi Arabia, where the situation is very disastrous. I'm trying to go a little faster by skipping certain important items. Now, concerning those who have to go by the Sahelian route, the situation is even more serious because the conveyors actually sell these women to terrorists who pass through Mali and Libya. And in most cases, their families have no wind of them because these women can disappear completely. But in such situations, especially concerning illegal migration, it is the identity of the transporters who are not even known, and these women, or the identity of the families that actually welcome them, are known. No connections. Since I have only 5 minutes. 1 minute, oh well, my goodness. So, in conclusion, as a word of conclusion, talking about this precise case of slavery, if we want to work and enter into the line of disconnection, of course, proposed by Professor Samin Amin for Africa, our action should be based on a total resilience of all forms of discrimination, acts of barbarism, feminicides in the name of feudal feminism for these women. Thank you. I'll stop this point. It is excellent, Marie-Ange. Unfortunately, we have a big time constraint, and it is we who are creators of this situation. We are incapable of actually defending the time we've set ourselves. You see, when it comes to such meetings, we don't see people anymore, and we have to change our minds, our mentality. It makes us actually lose or actually lose a lot of time. So we have the text. If you want to know the details, you can go there. You have the floor.
Si c'est possible, je...
Now, I love the idea of remaining horizontally, if it is agreeable to you. Morning, everybody. Now, I make a presentation on behalf of Francis movement. My heartfelt greetings, but we are here to pay tribute to a fundamental thinker of the liberation of the South and the construction of a word exempt from the micros illitropros. I agree to that I'm happy to be in the last panel of this last day. Illitropros du micro. He's too close to his mic, please. Now let me explain that. This is for a simple reason. So I come here in this symposium meant for the population of the South to talk about the point of view of the people of the South living in the North. This panel is about migration. I'll tell you about what happened after migration, once you have crossed the border. Now, it seems to me normal, in view of my age and my social and geographical position, to talk among the last after having listened to all other people.
Et parler en dernier n'implique évidemment pas d'avoir le...
So, and I would love to have the last word. Here, very quickly, I will try to share my reflection, passionate reflection. So it is my way to pay tribute to the elders that have spoken before me, and also to be submitted to their judgment. Because for me, as for the movement of that I belong to, and I'm here for Samin Amin, to whom we pay tribute, our only north is the south. So we have talked a lot about, during these last days, about the youth. We have regretted the absence of the youth of the south in the colloquium. Now, I cannot substitute myself to that youth, but I have seen them in those areas. These are brothers and sisters, student, militant with yellow shirt that I have seen moving around in this room, in the corridors of this university. These are militants I have met in the corridor, with whom I have some exchange, and who were full of truth and this quality of the youth. I would like to thank the organizers of this conference for these 3 days, as well as the youth being discreet, absolutely has taken part to make it possible, this tribute to an elder. Samin Amin was a scientist, a fighter. So like Frantz Fanon and like Asher Fantajo, the immense personality has observed us during these 3 days. As it has been said, Samin Amin was not a prophet. No, and of course, but he is an elder and a parent. So as you know, sometimes the children do not look like the parents. And I know here that people do understand what I'm talking about. We never insult our parents. And the desire of each children from the south is not to betray his parents. He was not a prophet, but he was a visionary. He had a vision. In a word, multiple word, and where we have imperial relationship that underlie the international relations. This period that we want full of hope is of all the damages and perils. So it comes from the center to the peripheral and the state. Entire people are crushed under the bombs, and people are fighting against each other. And once again, in the south and in the north, the situation is maintained, and inside all the bodies that come from the sea. So once again, the north maintains the south in the area of non-being, and the north is sterile and arid and dry, and it is maintained by a number of provision of knowledge, a wall of silence, but it is maintained by a layer of bombs. So when we talk about the zone, no zone, we talk about Sahel protected by the French army. We talk about this zone when we talk about Palestine, Syria, and Libya and Iraq, and the list is not complete. I think that these are characterized by international coalition in these devastated countries, and many are culprits. The foundation Frantz Fanon is from now on based on the north, but Frantz Fanon is a thinker of the south and a thinker of liberation. I have lived also this situation from the north to the south, and I've seen the emerging country. But I have to make some precision. The foundation Frantz Fanon goes in line with the anti-colonial fight. And why say decolonial rather than anti-colonialist or anti-Marxist? Because our experience, we people from the north forbid us about this type of identification if we want to follow the central ideas. Let me explain. In the north, many things are turned upside down compared to the south. Here we underline legitimate fights to be carried out, and we formulate it in the language of progressives. In the north, the same values are often taken to justify discriminatory policy. I think about my friend the Muslims discriminated on behalf of laicity. So, and this might justify some military intervention. Now, I contracting all the fight, to reassure them, I will add the definition of brilliant and young Norman Azari that the Foundation Frantz Fanon is happy to count him among its members. Now, decolonial is a word which will talk about a whole set of things relative to the genocide, and who is trying to conquer the world. So to say that the political anti-racism, that is to say the decoloniality, has nothing to do with the social movement, because it is older than the working class movement itself. So now that the presentation are done, let me follow. This noble assistance is composed of brilliant spirit, economists of great tradition, and militants, old militants. So my purpose will not be to give a lesson of economics and politics. The one talking to you comes from a northern country. His passport will offer him a privilege. This paper institutes a border between him and the south. Now allow me to say that when I cross the border and I enter a country of the south, I'm in a position of benefiting from all the privileges of the white, his purchasing power, his beautiful hotels, the protection of police, army, and consular authorities. Worst, this passport and the country from which it is will render me a foreigner to the south. The north, we are mixed, and from the Muslim point of view, it de-Islamizes us, and we say really that we integrate ourselves, that we usually say this word, integration. What a beautiful project. We pretend that after a phase of adaptation from the south of the north, it becomes equal to the white. But this is wrong, and all the statistics will prove that. The southern people of the north are not migrant. After many generations, we remain less bad, less professionally advanced, and we die earlier than the French from European origin. Even if we don't believe in God, now the people of the land of Islam remain sociological Muslim, and with signs of solidarity with the elders, it will be a pleasure to remind them, to accuse them as Islamists when it is accomplices of Islamic. These are titles of French newspaper. So they might feel something when they travel. They become the south in the north, the peripheral in the center, and the internal enemy. The conference of Bandung noted it, colonialism didn't die, and comes back under its worst form. So we, south of the north, we can be witness. Colonialism structure the social report in the north as it structure the relationship of the north and the south. We are indigenous people of the republic, and while the border that I talk about is porous, and this is covered by this notion of north and south. South penetrates the north through immigration. I talk about south in the plural because if the south is global, its different faces are joined to each other in a very differentiated way and with a hierarchy between the population. We find a Muslim community crossed through those divisions. So the south of the north do not have state because the state in which they live is the colonial state. The south of the north can have but autonomous organization because the existence is a challenge to the border. A transnational organization that will allow them to get related to the south. It is in this perspective that the Frantz Fanon has participated in the conference of the North in 2018 that will discuss about the problems that are prerequisite. So since I have a limited time, I don't know whether I can read one of the declaration of three voices. I will just read the end. How many minutes left? 1 minute, okay. I was talking, in this contribution, we talk about the migration, the fact that the people of the south go to the north, and we ask directly to the point to say this core thing. For this movement, all the South of the North are the fifth column of the third world, and they are really right. So, you will read it, the paper will be available. I'll just give you some elements to take part and reassure our older people to express myself so that Samir Amin will know about the future of his file. What was it, this conference of Bandung? After Bandung, we decided the organization of places of knowledge, whereby we have a knowledge, counter-hegemonic one, a knowledge that is decolonized. One of the areas is the colonial school that we organized since 2019. And you can find it in the website of the Frantz Fanon Foundation. Is it audiovisual? It's up to you to judge. Our actions are not limited to video. So we are tired of great projects that are lost under the form from without any concrete perspective. In this perspective, the banding of the North is concluded under a different form. Meaning, now these participants commit themselves on that. This is what the Frantz Fanon Foundation, and we take part in the event like this. And during these annual meeting, we would like to organize them more and more. And it is there we cross the track of our brother that we pay tribute to. I came into the political militantism at the time when Samir Amin formulated it, and where Hugo Chavez defined it with all the strength of a movement. This promise will not be in vain. This new world, that beyond the religious consideration, this new world is now being produced in this phase of transition in a situation whereby the former colonial center will be provincialized. Frantz Fanon was remembering it. From this arid zone, we can have a real revolution, the colonial one, that will have a disruption between the two. So, whether they like it or not, now, if they are egocentric or not, this phenomenon is going on and won't stop. So you have to be convinced, our elders, that we will win. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup. Aïcha, je crois que ça c'est...
Microphone, please. I'm not hearing. The proposal for the change in the forum, that is Fund for Action. Those who wish to dissolve or to continue the forum, that we continue, of course, doing it as a foundation. Let's not cross it out of our minds at all. My dream is we should continue to run it as a foundation.
Donc, Monsieur le Président, chers collègues, chers étudiants et étudiantes, permettez-moi de vous présenter ce travail de recherche, de terrain et de réflexion en hommage à Samir Amin, qui est un travail, comme je viens de dire, de terrain, qui entre dans le cadre du programme Ibn Khaldoun, financé par le CNRST Maroc, qui relève du ministère de l'Enseignement supérieur Maroc. Donc je suis Aïcha El Alaoui, professeure chercheuse universitaire du Maroc, chef de groupe de recherche économie solidaire et justice sociale, et aussi membre associé de l'équipe de recherche migration internationale et développement, et aussi je suis présidente d'un centre de recherche indépendant, ce centre d'IA pour les droits de l'homme, la démocratie et le développement. Je vais présenter 4 points essentiels de ce travail. C'est la relation entre migration et éducation, le contexte économique africain résultats préliminaires de ce travail et réflexions concluantes. Donc, la migration, c'est une action de déplacement qui a accompagné l'humanité depuis son existence connue dans différentes civilisations. Il peut s'accentuer, comme vous le savez, durant une période ou bien dans une région ou bien pays pour diverses raisons politiques, économiques, sociales, naturelles et culturelles. Elle est une nécessité, une obligation, une décision individuelle et collective. Bien sûr, la possibilité à toute personne de circuler librement existe dans les différents traités. Mais comme il l'a dit M. Abdelaziz, c'est qu'il y a des frontières qui séparent les gens, qui divisent les gens en situation régulière et situation non régulière. Ces frontières...
L'interprétation, la traduction, ça marche?
Oui, ça marche. Il y a eu un petit problème technique. Oui, ça marche. Il y a eu un petit problème mécanique, ça va. C'est résolu. Borders, as I said, of course, define the political territory of a country, but also economic. The example that is given between the North and the South, and also within the European Union, are all examples that can be given. The analysis of migration will take different components: the destination of the North-North, South-South, South-North, and even North-South, and the degree of economic, social, cultural development, and also the policy of the receiving state and the original state indicate that migration is a real translation of exclusion towards the, of course, search for inclusion. So the first demand, example of people, is to, of course, travel to satisfy their working conditions. It is also important to mention that if the person, of course, traveling is accompanied by children, if the educational system should meet their specific needs, which is different from children in the receiving countries. The problem is this: it's not easy to, of course, secure the training and education of children, especially in countries where development is only ongoing in a very rudimentary level. You see, migration can have consequences on the educational system in a country, because you should take account of the different situations of persons, those who travel, those who remain, who speak different languages from the teaching languages in the receiving country. It may even have repercussions on migration, because education is in fact a startup for education, and there is a political strategy to promote a very strong society, inclusive society, in order to fight discrimination and strengthen the skills of a country, either for the indigenous populations or those who are refugees. To understand the complex relationship of migration and, of course, those who travel, we have to take account of environmental, global, which is specific to every country. So migration and education are part of this socioeconomic, cultural conditions of countries of this region. So the objective is to analyze and understand this relationship between migration and education in a context of illegal development, which is that of Africa. The question of reflection of this work is how to set up an inclusive educational system which takes into account the relationship of inequality between developed and underdeveloped countries, bearing in mind the domination of what the North has over the South. The context, economic context of Africa, this is my second point. The current world is marked by very deep inequalities between regions of this world. These inequalities are either based on the wealth, education, health that exist in various countries. The inequalities continue to, of course, prevail. There are some indicators that are used to detect the inequalities. The first indicator is the inequality of GDP per capita, and of course, to measure, I'll just go straight to the conclusions. You have the figures before you. So a point of reflection with regard to this growth rate are encouraging in sub-Saharan Africa. It has spatial and economic inequalities, such like access to electricity, health, and employment. Now, is there any correlation between the growth rate in Africa and the growth rate in China and the European Union? Can we think that the Chinese situation reflects the African situation? The analysis of income inequalities shows that in spite of reducing the inequalities of countries, the world is marked by an increase in inequalities, and the existence of a revision of national policies to take account of inequality is still lagging behind. Why can't we set up a social justice for poverty and vulnerability? This phenomenon is complex. It prevents the participation of activities in political activity and even to take the route towards democracy. So after the analysis that I've done, I observe that the programs of 2010 or 2020 may not be attained, especially in countries of sub-Saharan countries. For the Human Capital Index, it has observed that future generations in Africa have very great chances of achieving their educational and health conditions. So African countries will continue to lose a lot of income because most African countries are not able to meet the long-term objectives and therefore continue to lose the potentiality of increasing the incomes of these inhabitants. So, two important remarks here. It is true that there is illegal migration, but also there is what I'll call brain drain. Most countries, where people leave to other developed countries, these migrants rather going to enrich the receiving countries. And so we need, of course, a lot of planning to be able to take account of these things, bearing in mind the social, economic, and so on. The same thing for employment. So for the results that we had with the work on Morocco, we have the following results. The migrants, sub-Saharan, of course, suffers from a lot of migrations. Some Moroccans even call them transmitters of diseases in the labor market. Second point, the migrants find difficulty in even attending Moroccan school institutions, but the educational system, which of course includes language difficulties. Now, this realization is striking in several countries, and this constitutes a sort of wastage of resources as receiving countries, because there's need to transfer funds from one country to another. The third result, most children in Africa are don't take the school as the right place for them, and therefore they don't have the social conditions. The educational system in African countries do not have the adequate quality for learners to achieve their aims, and even in some, if some of them, of course, are able to, of course, fulfill the aspirations, their living conditions are difficult. People who are educated are confronted with situations that are incapable of giving them security and human dignity. In the best cases, they are able to have work which is fragile in the context of their countries and in the international development areas. Most African youths decide to leave their country to guarantee economic situations that they lose in their own countries. We have also seen that education is a developed area. If this is achieved, it means of course, the triggering factor is that a child who leaves his country to go to another country, we need to talk about the difference in economic structures and economic difficulties encountered in Africa are almost the same everywhere. Whether a country is located outside or within the country, the conditions persist with a few barriers to learning, either more or less the inclusion of migrants in the same educational establishments as the receiving country is a very important condition to secure social cohesion. And Morocco has endorsed this view that programs of study should promote diversity and denounce prejudice and have positive repercussions are obtained, of course, in the classroom. So, conclusive remarks. Most of these educational systems of African countries reproduce the situation of poverty, marginalization, and social injustice. And this, depending on the specificity of a country, of course, make human rights not taken into account. And you may have a population which is are not qualified, depending on the, of course, needs of the market in the north, and in the absence of independent economies. It is necessary that these different populations should find conditions to guarantee their future, either in the northern countries or countries outside their own countries. And the economic system throughout the world is, of course, what defines the destiny of most countries. So migration is what it should be too. So this is the conclusion. But there are other factors like governmental crisis and other crises. And so here, I have the words of Amin on the system that you know. Let me just end on this note by saying the next paragraph that the major challenge for African countries is how to set up an economic and social model marked by the globalization and power relations. The analysis of the African situation indicates that development is not the business of only one country. It can be achieved only within the framework of a South-South cooperation, where education will be a strategic choice and have to define the... Thank you. You talked for 16 minutes. It's okay. Aisha, thank you so much. It is a joy to intervene after the youth. Whereas my heart was breaking because it is not possible to, of course, drop this youth. And so I want to thank Aisha Aziz. So I want to, of course, I'm going to be very brief because there will be comments. I want to know how this theme has actually shaken me, because it affects humanity or mankind, because we've seen that it's not a Samin. I was thinking of the poem of Baudelaire, who says that the cats are even fervent lovers even love cats. And so I see in this room fervent lovers, and the idea is that everybody is crying for emancipation and peace. And I was, of course, hit by humanity, through which some persons paid very moving tribute. I remember the one on humanity. That is the human, this man-child who always plays the role of children by thinking of their future. And he actually presented himself in all modesty and guarantees that men and women like you and us are part of the world. And that is where the hope is. And our president of the African Union fought that would be elected unanimous, because we had actually tripped, because we didn't look at skills and looked at the color of his skin. And so the Association of Europe actually withdrew, because Amin was elected. That is the Global Council of Education, a member of the scientific, of course, council, which is part of UNESCO's outfit. It is for us to change the situation. Now, I had prepared some papers, epistemological and so on and so forth, but we don't need that. We need other things. What actually my friend Sheriff, brother Sheriff, C means a teacher in Arabic. So C is in fact the Lord of change, positive change, I hope, because he is a source of hope. He has met here with his team. I want to thank him, Eli, and all those members of the youth who, of course, transported. It shows that there is hope. There is hope, because I see that there are two recurring questions which keep coming up in this symposium, and which reproach us. First, why don't we have enough young boys and girls? The youth are the source of hope, and yet they are not present in this room. Second question, what do we have to do? What is the line that we need to toe as we give tribute or pay tribute to this great man? And so let me talk about the youth and what we can do. If you permit, Mr. Chair, everything that I'll say as what I've said before, don't include it in the time frame. That is Aisha speaking. Do everything that you want. So thank you for giving me. Yesterday I threatened ex-dean of this faculty. I threatened him. I told him, if you don't give me enough time to say what I want to say, I'm going to denounce you internationally. He laughed and ran away, of course, embraced each other. But, of course, and you tell me the title of the President of Africa. Yes, I also want to propose and repropose it again. The President of Africa, not only a foundation. I always say that if I have to propose by personalities that I know, and I have a lot of links with the youth, and yet everybody knows me of extreme qualities that all of us have of the continent and the content. And sometimes we confuse the content and the container are the same. And my vision is that Africa will continue to get united. And I propose Sharif as our President of Africa and Vice President Therese Ndiri. There should be a parity in sex. And if we don't like him or don't see him in that harness, we can replace him by somebody else. Well, this morning I got up at 2 p.m. this morning and wrote a poem. I'm a writer. poet and so on. When I'm not in the, of course, the lecture room. It's not utopian. Sharing knowledge is important, but we even have to share utopic situations. So we are capable of getting emancipated. Bring your drop of water and we will be able to fertilize our lands with them, because a shot, let's say a drop of water by itself alone doesn't mean anything. But if we all bring our sort of drops of water, we'll be able to move forward. I'm president of a Congress of Women, and if you have about 600, 700 students, it's not good when you go before a stream, and before this stream you don't see water. You know the result. And there'll be, of course, the best relations between cousins, and that is men and women. So we should be a river coming from our sources, and which, of course, irrigates our lands in Africa and the whole world. I'm thinking and dreaming of this river. I'm thinking of water. Water simply. Water that will become the principal stake tomorrow of walls that will cut deep into Africa and will be completely dry, and our lands will start cracking because there's no one. So it's for us to bring water. This morning I got up and I said, look, I, who am a poet, I wrote a small poet, and I read it before I critical. It's called The Refugee of the Dollar. And I said to all these people and this youth that are abandoned and are left to go outside the continent and drop in the sea, this is what we call the dollar refugees. And these break my heart. The sea that does so and pushes me to anger. And under the clouds, they break the land with regard to the black clouds for candidates at the last. Of course, they embark on the boat and get to lands that they don't know, and sometimes lose their way. Their lands, their bodies are left on the seaside, dead, lifeless. And my heart tells me, remain here, powerless. We are unable to save even children. Oh, my friends, have you felt the distress of these candidates who are rushing to the doors of the dollar? Have you felt the despair, the distress of these candidates just to chase after the dollar, which they don't ever get? My brothers and sisters, have you felt their despair, the reproach that they face? And yes, the sea is actually ripping out, and very violent waves sounding the heart of humans and asking us, what are we doing with this present sad situation? My heart is also sharp. This heart that is faithful to Winnie Mandela, even if she has changed, my heart is still beating for her. My heart is beating for Gandhi, faithful to Aretha King, and my heart is also beating for the former faithful people tortured, executed, dead with repeated famine, for our future and for our present. Oh, my brothers and friends, let us hold our hands together and let us sing together, at least that tomorrow will be eliminated this famine. Thank you for your attention. Now, 2 reproaches. We don't only have to sing praises. 2 reproaches. The youth we should convince them to return. It is for us to transmit messages and train teachers, not only within the framework of this educational system. No, we can teach our youth even in the lobbies everywhere. You see, we haven't trained them. It's we. The fault, of course, is we who have failed. We didn't train them to these universal values. They were not trained to them. There's an Algerian proverb who says, father talking her daughter says, a lady teacher gives a lot of trust to her husbands. Now, we don't have this type of education. That's a reproach that we are making, and not only to you. And then how do we bring in change? That's the second point. A change is there. I was talking yesterday with a new friend that I know. He's Sudanese, is a conference officer, a young boy. And he was asking me circumstances. And I told him, look, change is whether we like it or not. There's something that we cannot escape from. And he says that change is inherent in every society. We are equal on this item. But there are two types of change. There is a change that is violent, and which we see, whether it's capitalism, globalism, and so on, we undergo it. I call that the change that affects us. Then there's another type of change, is the fact by saying insidious change as a disease that we see once it actually affects us. So this insidious change, let's not call it a disease. Let's act on it depending on our character by trying to get this positive character, resilience, not resignation but resilience, to change things that will become positive. So this is how we should look at things, in my view. And so practically all of us, all the interventions converge towards what I say. So if we want to go forward, move forward, it shouldn't be during my retirement period. And African women, the age for us is that as our age increases, the happier we are, because it makes it possible to, of course, enjoy time. So it is a right of a dean, and it is therefore, it's not the time here to discuss who is a dean or not, but I'm just a woman, and I'm the dean from the standpoint of age, not competence, but I can say this, that the future is in our hands, and not in the short term. It's not in the medium term, but in the long term. That means I may probably not in a position to this change that may take place and become a solidarity. But we can do something. What can we do exactly? That is where the question is. What can we do? Well, I would propose with my friend Mr. Therese, who is a grand personality, I proposed concretely that we have a World Association, for peace through education. And what education? Education of values, because you can train people, technologists, engineers, and so on. If the human aspect is not there, what happens in Africa especially? We will train them, they go and they won't return anymore. And what is happening in the Western world? I went to see a doctor. He was on his computer and he was telling me, what do you have, madam? What is your problem? And I asked him, you don't want to even look at my face because you are only looking at your computer, and asked him. And then I drew his attention and said, look, you are not somebody who cannot actually be recuperated. Now, if you are only looking at machines and not looking at the human face, the word Islam has been mentioned. We have not mentioned that, but we know what Islam does, how the youth, we are not, we don't have solidarity between us. We haven't, of course, shared our words. And so what happens? They'll go elsewhere and they become bogus preachers. Bogus preachers. I had a nephew. I talk openly in my family and said, "Oh, auntie, this is a very important book." And I told him, he was just talking about himself. And I said, "Look, my nephew, we need what is happening in Paris now. You take the plane." And he's serious. And he comes saying things that are purely valueless. And he said, "No, it's not Wahhabite things that I'm talking about." And he said, "This is not really sad." And what is happening is really serious. So, with people with good brains are led astray. And we need to talk about this because we are training terrorists. You see, don't mention the word of Islam to these people. Don't talk about Islam to them. Thank you infinitely, Mr. Chair. You've given this opportunity to know you, to express myself, and in my lecture rooms in France and everywhere. I am the person you have seen. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Is Samia in the room? Samia for her communication. Samia Zenati. Ils sont dans le programme de l'après-midi.
Voilà, nous avons donc quasiment récupéré. Nous avons.
So we have collected, catched up many lost time. So we would like to see whether people would like to take the floor or have questions. And I would like to tell Aisha that we have taken good note of what she said. And I think that there are many confusions. The forum is the think tank that have indulged in in-depth research. It was a forum of works. Today it is a success that we organized a conference and we have decided to open it to the public, and we had more than 100%. We integrated the young people, we find them where they are. We have to take into account what you said and what the others said. But what we tried to do since 2016, and I still have hope that we will succeed in bringing people back to the amphitheater on condition that the forum will continue. So, but in fact, we don't have to leave them to the social forum. We have to bring them back to the amphitheater and the auditorium so that they can share the work we do. Thank you very much again by noting that all the cases you have talked about it, you have talked about Islam. But we don't have time to develop everything. But I think that we need to apprehend that aspect because it is at the core of these problems. As Edin was talking about it, when I lived between the two countries, I felt myself in Saint-Denis, the most populated department in France. I think that this is why his texts really make me feel a special feeling. And so I will require your wisdom, and we will have 45 minutes. So we will take Etienne Gadio, not as Vice President of the National Assembly, but as Etienne Gadio of Junctions of all the Pan-Africanist movement, as a link of all the Pan-Africanist movement that we have known. Now, let's start with Sheikh Oyu. Siroz. Merci beaucoup pour cette session excellente. Mais je pense qu'on a besoin d'être attentif. We always talk about youth, but nous avons besoin de nous rappeler de Fanon, de Patrice Lumumba, Amilcar Cabral, etc., etc. Ils avaient un âge où, et aujourd'hui on appelle jeunesse, en fait ce ne s'agit pas de la jeunesse qui soit absente ici. Je pense qu'il y a d'autres absences dont nous devons faire cas. Parce que l'histoire nous enseigne que ce n'est pas seulement un jeune qui transforme le monde. Cela requiert la représentation de ceux qui sont engagés dans la lutte parmi la classe ouvrière, parmi le prolétariat, parmi les chômeurs qui sont sans abri, ceux qui travaillent la terre pour rien. Ils ne sont pas là, ce sont des absences. Donc il y a des absences ici que nous devons souligner, nous devons le souligner. Il y a des territoires occupés, par exemple, qui luttent, qui ne sont pas représentés ici. Nous avons nos camarades du Maroc, mais nous n'en avons pas du Sahara occidental, un territoire occupé. Je pense que nous devons être braves pour faire part de nos témoignages, de nos faiblesses. Et je pense que c'est le point que vous avez souligné. Et je pense que nous devons reconsidérer que si nous voulons avancer, si nous devons rendre hommage à Samin, nous devons insister qu'on a des représentants de ceux qui sont engagés dans la lutte et qui ont en termes d'histoire, que nous savons que ce sont ceux-là qui vont transformer le monde. Merci beaucoup, Cyrus. Cher Monsieur le ministre, s'il vous plaît. Let me remind you that many trade union leaders were in the room for the opening ceremony. They have represented their organization and the form they wanted, but they came because the trade unions are in other battles, because at the time we meet, there is also the national dialogue that is ongoing in our country. But the leaders of that national dialogue was in our room. This is what we've never done, inviting the Employers Association, the youth, etc. And we continue our job in the sense that Cyrus mentioned it. The less old, the old one, the elderly, all of us, the young, we are in the same word at the same time. And this is to be improved, the construction of these bridges to have meetings as we get out of our laboratory, but I have the hope that we will succeed. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Thank you very much. I would like, allow me to greet all the members of this assistance, this audience, and congratulate them for their participation to the paying tribute to a great person. I have taken the risk to say in an interview about the symposium that we have put Act number 1, paying tribute to Amin, with the African expertise which remobilized around Amin, which is a good thing. But Act number 2 will be the popular tribute to Amin, whereby we will have to mobilize those who are not expert at some level, because Amin dedicated his life to the cause of emancipation, so to the cause of popular masses. So I would like to develop one point. Many things, of course, I have to say. We will not be doing again the conference, but I have a preoccupation. I cannot understand that in Africa, the Africans will decide, once again, and it is a repetition of history, decide to wait for the situation to be irreversible to talk about it. So for 10 years now, our continent is under attack. A major terrorist aggression. There is a war declared to Africa, and the Africans do not talk about this war, or they talk about it partially. We have organized an excellent symposium on serious subject. I think that what happened in Mali today, in Niger, in Burkina Faso, in Sahel, what happened now in Kenya and the Shebab in Somalia, what happened now in DRC with IDF, what happened now in Mozambique. There is a global attack against the continent. And these people are financed. They are armed and equipped. They enter from Libya, and of course they have settled everywhere. They have a strategy, a vision. We do not have a strategy, we do not have a vision. They occupy progressively the continent. They destroy country after country. Today, Burkina Faso. I came back from there 1 week ago. 600,000 displaced in an African country without resources. The state did not succeed in ensuring the security of the citizen. Students are slaughtered, receive bullets, and women in market are isolated and executed. Men are executed. Systematic attack. Boko Haram has counted 30,000 deaths in Nigeria and around the Lake Chad basin between 2009 and now. In 2014, when the terrorists of the whole world waged competition, we knew that Boko Haram has slaughtered about 6,000 persons in 1 year, burned some village people, and throw them in the lake. Now put people in cage and put petrol and burn them. These acts are fascist. There is no other name to qualify them. And in the meantime, the African countries develop a strategy of resistance based particularly sometimes on seeking for support from abroad. So we go to the United Nations. The Security Council of the United Nations sent a mission in Mali called MINUSMA to maintain peace. What is the peace to be maintained? The attack is general. It is war that is declared. And at the beginning I said that the attack against Mali was a strategic choice. What is Mali? It is our cultural heritage, intellectual, historical one. Destroying Mali is to attack us in what we have inside ourselves, and people are doing the job. Today they are trying the distribution of Mali, North, Center, etc. They are everywhere. When we have killed 4 American soldiers in September 2017, the global world put newspaper titles on that. So when Nigerian soldiers was massacred, even no African newspaper talked about it. So we have a problem. Mr. Sarkozy, NATO, Mr. Cameron, those people who have opened the border to create this. Today we are talking about bringing Bashir to the International Tribunal. Of course it's good, but if he has committed crime, why not bring those who destabilize our country? Open the door so that the terrorists came in. The terrorist international, all of them seem to have signed a pact around Africa, because Africa has chosen not to organize his army. The army of Nkrumah since 1963, I was dumbfounded to spend 3 days in African Union and see that they have decided to organize a summit on African army, and it's the President Al-Sisi who will host it. So 2020. So how many a time have they taken to understand? As Nkrumah said it, being the richest continent of the world, how can't we create an African army to defend the continent? Distinguished friends, the question of terrorism is not taken seriously by the African. It is understandable and acceptable, and the rest of the world would say, as long as they do not understand what happened to them, these people came and get their share from Africa, because Africa is a cake, and whoever wants to take it will take it. Chinese are there, Brazilians are there, Indians are there, and everybody organized his summit with African countries. We have invited Turkey, that I respect other country. For the first time I have seen in the recent history of humanity a country calling his National Assembly to adopt a resolution giving him a resolution to go and wage war in Africa, in Libya. And there is no communique of the African Union to say what happened. Why do you say that? On behalf of what will you authorize your National Assembly to come and wage war in our country? Why can't we wage this fight to ask the question that a war is opened in Africa? Countries are dying one after the other, and the strategy is coherent. Everybody knows that in Libya there are two big clans, the Iranian, Turk and Qatari together, Egyptian and Emirati together, two big blocks. The Western country will have as a recourse. They don't want a debate on Libya. If they don't want, we will organize it elsewhere. But where is Africa? Are we going to accept again that one part of our continent is taken, Libya, to discuss about its problem outside the African continent? Libya, whether you want it or not, is an African country. It is obvious. Libya represents a lot of things for us. And we made some arrangement to leave them decide about Libya. So when we will finish with the destabilization of Sahel, as I said, for the first time we see terrorists in a continent that is interested in the forest, that is interested in water, in natural resources of earth, and who will dive towards Mozambique and try to get in South Africa. But what happened in Algeria, in Morocco, terrorist attacks, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt. Now, of course, they are everywhere in Africa. They have a strategy on the continent, and Africa doesn't have a strategy. So, dear friends, we have to come back to the debate of Sheikh Anta Diop and Nkrumah. Security comes before development. Today, when people will come and tell us, you know, terrorism is related to poverty, etc. But since when do we have stopped to be poor, and since when have we been poor? Since the independence up to now, we didn't have any terrorists. Bin Laden, was it a poor? And Baghdadi, who made his first conference with a Rolex watch of $100,000, is he poor? Poor. All the graduate from Saudi Arabia, are they poor? The link we did to say that you cannot gain the war with terrorism, they are more powerful than you. You have to solve the problem of terrorism. You see, Africa is a continent where all the stupid traps and ideas are developed here, and they want us to swallow it. So each state has got its army capable of defending its territory. What Sheikh Anta called the small state, after 60 years with solitary ride, it's time to stop this cinema. The paradigm of our development and independence is a false paradigm. It's a false paradigm. So, dear friends, the shrinking of our small state, it is high time to not to go back, but to go to a new direction and to elaborate a complete paradigm. Africa doesn't have a future without unity. The United States of Africa of Nkrumah, as Samin said, she mentioned it, if we cannot do what we want in our country, let's do it at the level of the region. Why not the United States of West Africa, the United States of Central Africa, and then we will have a great continental federation. And I will finish with that. Not 10 years ago, I was discussing with our friend from SADC, our brother and sister. When you talk about Pan-Africanism, they start laughing. You see, they say that you people are living about a paradigm that is foregone. Today, people talk about paradigm because the problem of the survival of the continent is there, the future of the continent is there, and it is important to take some decision. We need accelerating leaders that are ready to accelerate the history, men and women, that hand in hand will commit themselves, transform the country, go to unity, go over the egoism to build Senegal with Senegalese. Building Senegal with Senegalese and Mali with Malians have never been true. I have talked with my friend Selwyn Sarr. It won't work and it will never work. Thank you very much, Sister Tijan. Thank you very much, Aziz. Now after Bernard Funo.
Just a few words. The first is that I would like to thank Bernard Funu. He ran. Yesterday we didn't have enough time because when he came, I wanted to say these few words, but we didn't have time to do that. So let me also thank Lily and Bernard Funu, who were in the shadows of Amin for about 30 years, and who, because of their extraordinary work linked by the titanic efforts of Sheriff, have been able to keep the flame of this forum burning. This forum has an extraordinary fire because it has brought together several persons, and listening to what they've said since yesterday, in fact, the first day up to now, there is a vision, there is a program. The Bamako call was an essential call, and most of us are keenly aware of it. The fact that our problem, the problem of us is that we refuse to listen. What Sheikh Tijan Gajo expressed, the bulk of what he said was signed in a declaration by 50 Germans and Africans who refused the presence of a military base, American base, in Stuttgart against the African continent, and refused the use of chaos. And the colleague who talked about the issue of the Arab issue, Samin Amin, said that the Arab economic situation doesn't exist. The death of the crisis is culturalism, and Algeria has remained relatively silent in the situation in Libya because it was, of course, functioning within AFRICOM, and the triad took I don't know how many papers. Now that terrorism is linked with populism, we should not lose sight of the fact that we are also participating in this misfortune with the same capacity of maintaining Africa within a poverty syndrome. And this all comes from a geopolitics that is being imposed. When this film is of Africa Go Home, made for Africans without means, and when you touch the word Africa, you hit even the Pentagon and so on, and other African countries have the same name. So, as he said, Lumumba, Fanon, and Cabral started young, and they died young. And now that we are old and we are part of it, I want to address the youth. It is a continent filled with the youth, you see. And so it's a symposium. So we are among ourselves. That is the vocation. But our work should be based on the youth of Africa. Trevor, vous avez soulevé le même problème lorsque le RTP a été abandonné et que les Sud-Africains ont endossé l'ajustement structurel qu'ils se sont infligés eux-mêmes avant que la Banque mondiale n'intervienne. Et les mêmes personnes, Tokyo Sexual et Cyril Ramaphosa, tous ceux qui ont soutenu bien sûr l'autonomisation de la bourgeoisie noire, on croyait que l'Afrique du Sud allait être le locomotive de l'intégration continentale, mais c'était sous le règne de Madame Zuma qu'ils ont abandonné les plans, qu'ils ont mises en œuvre à travers l'Afrique comme au sein de l'Union africaine. Mais le problème, c'est que la jeunesse ignore ce qui se passe. So we should understand that our states have been taken as hostages. It's not a lack of patriotism. The margin of operation of our states is really, our states have been reduced to their simple or mere expression. And today we have a simple problem. Either we succeed to realize that we have a vision and programs, and we have to fight to, of course, take our space of sovereignty, or we become part of the problem and also part of the solution. You see, if we don't realize that the small quality that we represent and the last hope of resistance of this continent, we are going to run into a lot of errors. And I'm going to talk about two things. The first is the fight against apartheid started because South Africa launched their move, and then they have an anti-apartheid movement. Today, those who have been chased from Ouagadougou and are hiding in Côte d'Ivoire participated in the destabilization of Burkina. It is the same that prepared and stopped the Pan-African project of Thomas Sankara. It's about 22 years that we have our advocates of course, Sankara. We are looking for aid from everybody to remove, of course, the nebulous Wahhabite and the geopolitics who supported them. They are supported because comprador forces have succeeded to infiltrate our religious circles to the point of our youth. And so we have to look at that. Our work is to reinvigorate the efforts of the Third World Forum and give it a second ammunition, and using the 50 works of Samin and use the extraordinary potential to channel this energy. And therefore those who are actually in their high powers and become some sort of the breaking of the sea waves. I think we are in a third generation, Africans. They don't know whether they're Africans or Europeans. We high class here, and the African diaspora spread everywhere should come back to a united continent. That is our dream. And this is what Amin said. Aziz, thank you. Let me now give the floor to Mamadou Bailoba. Mamadou is a coordinator of our volunteers who are the West African Patriotic Movement, social West African, and they, of course, represent 60,000 youth associations. Thank you, Dean, for giving me the floor, because a mattered youth will be listening, and they become, therefore, a force to reckon with. I'm a member, Amadou Jallo, and I have a capacity built-in program for youth engagement. So thank you for the organizing committee for having made it possible to contribute in our own way to pay tribute to Prof. Amin. Professor Samin Amin, this personality has always inspired us, because we remember that from this humble personality is always ready to to meet us with open arms and to talk to us in a mutual, comprehensive manner. And I was also lucky through the economic situations to participate at his conferences, but also to meet him twice in his office. A very simple office. But when I look at the other side of his library, I realized that he had something extraordinary around it. And so the wealth that he has, of course, bequeathed to us is important, and we should use it for the good of humanity. Today I'm here, and I'm taking advantage of the situation to say that this youth that we are, youth that is committed on the Pan-Africanist Forum, because I militate in different organizations and also at the level of the diaspora. I'm a member of the Senegalese movement for reparations, a movement that remembers Africa and comes here within the framework of Africa Reconnection. We met in Gorée, and another one has been planned very soon. I want to say that today, as a youth, a committed youth that participates in these different events, and I've had the opportunity to meet several intellectuals who inspire us. We are a bit confused at a given point in time. Why? Because in a system like the one we find ourselves in, which we think is strangling us, it's actually stifling us. We need a lot of help for the youth to come back to what they used to be. Now, if we look at the economic, social situations, it is important because we should look at all the plans and adopt the strength in which the peoples themselves can, of course, take power. Self-management. If today we are in a community, the citizens are organized and they have their problems, it gives them more power, but the capacity to participate really over and above what we call today participatory government, in which people do not express themselves. It depends on two things. Either we, as citizens, we should assume our responsibility at the grassroots level, but to refuse all the policies that go with exclusion, and which is that a drop in the Atlantic Ocean. We are aware of what is happening today, whether in Mali and everywhere in the continent, the business of war. And for us, this war business is affecting us, because as long as there's no peace, we cannot develop our potential to contribute to Africa's development. So today, all these realities that we are experiencing, we are organized and we need these alternatives. And these alternatives can be implemented only when the thinkers, the intellectuals, and we ourselves as the youth group work together. Everybody should play his role. Today, we have writings and thoughts which are simple to understand, which make it also possible to have an operational approach, which will make it possible for us to get involved in whatever is happening. Before I close my speech, I want to pay tribute to Agi Mali Sanya. Today he is in prison, and for Africans to be left off the hook, I'm thinking of him, and I think people will understand, not later but now, and learn or assume their responsibilities in order to assume responsibilities of their locality. So thank you so much to my collaborators, everybody who is here, and the Pan-Africanist comrades, and all our elders who have given us this position to share their space with them. Let me add by saying that you have a popular Amin University that you are going to launch. The last speaker, Bernard Funu, of course, the catering officer has just called my attention. We have to go to the other side to have our last conference. Bernard, take the floor and then we'll zoom out of this space. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think among the persons who spoke yesterday of Samin, there were some who revealed how, depending on how events rolled out, can affect their temperament. when I learned that there is a revolution, anti-capitalist revolution. Some friends in the imperialist world have lost their lives and so on. But I think in the last 3 interventions we can safely conclude that personally I get the feeling that the intellectuals, African intellectuals in particular, are almost too intellectual and not actually anguished by what is happening. You see, the anguish is reflected when you act differently, when you get to a period where you see that there is a special conjuncture, and this special conjuncture in which we find ourselves today, this is what Gaju explained. We are in an economic situation of the disappearance as historic subjects for which, I'm sorry to say this, those who took the floor before us struggled up to the independence level, and when they got there, they said, well, this is a new starting point. Well, ancestors, when others came with their armies regarding the principle, they were less informed than we are. The Teto Samori, they were less informed with regard to the stakes compared with what is happening now. But today, we make analysis and we think that if there is a dissemination more or less of what we have said, because that's the objective, and this objective has been attained. But I think that the question of knowing how concretely we can act in Africa, well, I think Minister Gaju can support what I'm saying. I don't see how at the African Union or the Organization of African Unity, at that level, or at the African Union as we call it today, how this is done, that the 2 major fundamental principles which were in the Charter of the African Organization have been removed. First, we have the question of the modification or change of borders left by colonization. We shouldn't touch of them. We shouldn't touch them. You know, the borders should remain the way they are. If you decide to change by force the borders of colonization, if I can use the expression, it is an open door to colonization again. The second element in the OAU Charter, it is said that African countries should not have foreign bases in their countries. But at the African Union level, it has been transformed into an auxiliary, these interventions. So, and in the eyes of all this, our reactions as intellectuals, more or less with organic vocations and so on, I don't know how to define it. Frankly, it is not visible. We don't see them. And it can be visible only if we make ourselves visible. If we are here in Senegal and we say that this problem is serious and we want that President Macky Sall hears us with regard to this problem, because it is a problem of existence for us in our view. And if we have something to tell him, we should be able to tell him, and tell him in plain language, and ask him, do you take this issue to the African Union table for discussion? I think we should be visible by making ourselves visible, and we should have some sitting. You cannot be visible in the current economic situation because it's a conjuncture, if I can use the word, and it's very, very important. What we are doing from the intellectual standpoint is no question to abandon this field, because you see, it is an idea that we physically, as persons in this area, the time that we are living now is so critical that we don't show physically that we are here. Thank you. I'll stop there. Well, this brings the curtain down on our session this morning. I want to thank all the speakers for the development of issues. First of all, Sheti Njano has drawn our attention, and Bernard Funo, and especially Aziz, and the questions. They call upon us to vigorously continue the work that we have started as for years with Samin. But Gajo says we should take another path. How can we continue mobilizing only the youth when there is a clear project of liquidation of higher education during the date of the African Renaissance or Africa Rebirth? I prepared a paper on the criticism of the European Roundtable and the Philadelphia Conference. The project was just to banish higher education, and they said right from scratch that governments, those they call progressives or patriots, do not understand the needs of their, of course, enterprise. We are going to start again and leave in the hands of the state basic education. This is what brought in double stream schools. Today, I don't want to. Today, the horizon that people can get is the masters. Anything that gives you a reflection, and of course, all the youth are doing that.
Sir, tout le monde veut devenir.
With very bad, guide by professors. Everybody wants to be a senior administrative officer. But when we are talking about mobilizing, financed by the French Cultural Center, it's something that we are actually clapping our hands for. And often it is our professors. When we celebrated Sheikh Anta Diop, the room was only filled with the students from Dakar. If we join them, this will draw the attention of teachers. And what is even more serious is that the program of the Europe Roundtable and the Philadelphia Conference, the latter was that for the OECD bosses. They said we have to liquidate or banish, African universities. And so nobody wants our national, certificates. People want to have a small, diploma here in our areas, and then another small certificate at the University of Quebec, and feel satisfied. You see, once again, the debate can continue, but I want to thank you on this last line, and I invite all of you at 2 p.m., 2:30 p.m. And once again, thank you for having accompanied us with regard to this effort that will, of course, open our eyes over the world. It's a second attempt. We should not just have two representatives. Mamadou is a group of youth extremely important. They are with us in the social forum for the past 7 years. They are always with us and have their eyes wide open to whatever we are doing. But it is we that listen to ourselves. Whom do you see as a senior lecturer being called upon in the press to say something about, of course, our friends? You can talk about the articles of Mustafa Salif and so on, but I think we should talk about the current values, what our governments should stop doing. We should stop reading the reactionary journals of France. Thank you. So we observe the break. Thank you. Please, relaxation and lunch.
Da nga ñëw ko